Las Vegas, September 1963. The Copa Room at the Sands Hotel was packed. 200 people, high rollers, politicians, Hollywood stars. The kind of crowd that paid $100 a plate just to be in the room. Frank Sinatra was performing that night, sold out like always. But before he ever took the stage, something happened in the private lounge backstage that nobody in that room would ever forget. A man made a joke about Frank's mother. And what Frank did next didn't just silence the room. It ended a career in less than 4 minutes. This is the story they still whisper about in Vegas. September 14th, 1963, Saturday night. The Sands Hotel was the center of Las Vegas power. Not the biggest casino, not the flashiest, but it was the place. The Rat Pack performed there. Presidents stayed there. Deals worth millions got made in the back rooms. And the man who owned a controlling stake in it was Ray Colton. Colton wasn't mob, he was worse. He was a businessman who acted like mob. Loud, arrogant. The kind of guy who wore diamond cufflinks and told everyone how much they cost. He'd made his fortune in construction, government contracts during the war. Then he moved into Vegas real estate in the 50s when the city was exploding. By 1963, he had a piece of 3 casinos, including the Sands. And Colton thought that owning the Sands meant he owned the performers. He was wrong. Frank Sinatra had been performing at the Sands for 5 years. He had a contract. He had a suite. He had control over his shows, who opened, what songs he sang, when he started. That kind of control bothered Colton. He didn't like anyone having power in his casino. That night, Frank arrived at the Sands around 8 p.m. His show was scheduled for 11. He always came early, walked the room, checked the sound, made sure everything was perfect. With him that night was his mother, Dolly Sinatra. Dolly was 68 years old, tiny woman, barely 5 feet tall. But she had a presence that filled any room she walked into. She'd raised Frank in Hoboken, New Jersey, working-class neighborhood, immigrant community. She'd worked as a midwife, ran a saloon during Prohibition, did whatever it took to keep the family fed. Frank worshipped her. Everyone who knew him knew that. You could insult Frank's singing. You could criticize his movies. You could call him arrogant, difficult, temperamental. But you did not say a word about Dolly. Before the show, there was a small reception in the private lounge backstage. Invitation only. High rollers who'd paid extra. VIPs. People Ray Colton wanted to impress. Frank and Dolly were there, making the rounds. Frank was charming. Dolly was funny, sharp, telling stories about Frank as a kid that made everyone laugh. Ray Colton was holding court near the bar, surrounded by 6 or 7 people. Real estate developers, local politicians, a couple of showgirls. He was drinking, talking loud, making sure everyone knew he was the man who made this all possible. Frank and Dolly walked past on their way to the dressing room. Colton saw them, and he couldn't resist. "Hey, Frankie!" Colton's voice cut through the room. Frank stopped, turned. "Yeah? Come over here a second. I want to introduce you to some people." Frank hesitated. He didn't like Colton, never had. But he walked over anyway. Dolly stayed a few steps behind. Colton grinned. "Everybody, this is Frank Sinatra. He's singing for us tonight. Best voice in Vegas, when he's sober." Polite laughter. Uncomfortable. Frank's smile didn't reach his eyes. "And this," Colton gestured at Dolly, "is his mother. Dolly, right?" "That's right," Dolly said. "Dolly Sinatra from Hoboken, New Jersey. You know, I read about you in a magazine once. Said you used to run a speakeasy during Prohibition. That true?" "It's true." "That's wild. You must have some stories. Working-class girl, immigrant neighborhood, doing whatever it took to get by. And now look, your son's a big star, and you get to fly first class and stay in fancy hotels." Dolly's face didn't change. I'm proud of my son. Of course you are. Hell, if I came from where you came from, I'd be proud too. Climbing all the way up from the gutter. That's the American dream, right? The room went quiet. Frank's jaw tightened. Colton kept going. I mean, you probably never imagined your kid would end up on magazine covers when you were delivering babies in tenement buildings, right? When you were, what's the word, uneducated? No offense, but you didn't go to college or anything, did you? Dolly's voice was calm. No, I didn't. Right. You were busy surviving, doing what you had to do, and now here you are, wearing a nice dress, drinking champagne, watching your son perform for rich people. That must feel pretty good. Frank spoke. His voice was quiet. Ray? Yeah? Don't. Colton laughed. Don't what? I'm complimenting your mother. I'm saying she did a hell of a job raising you, considering where she came from. You're not complimenting her. Sure I am. I'm saying she climbed out of the gutter and made something of herself through her son. That's impressive. Frank took a step forward. Say that again. Colton's smile faltered. What? The part about the gutter. I didn't mean... Say it. The entire room froze. 20 people, silent. You could hear ice melting in glasses. Colton looked around. His face was flushed. He was drunk enough to be brave, but not drunk enough to miss the danger. Frank, come on. I'm just making conversation. You said my mother climbed out of the gutter. It's a figure of speech. You said she was uneducated. You called her a working-class girl who got lucky because of me. Colton's face went red. Look, I didn't mean anything by it. Frank's voice dropped lower, colder. Yes, you did. Frank didn't move, didn't raise his voice. He just stood there, looking at Ray Colton, and the silence became unbearable. Colton tried to laugh it off. Jesus, Frank, you're too sensitive. I was paying her a compliment. Apologize. What? Apologize to my mother. Colton glanced at Dolly. She was standing there, calm, watching. Frank, seriously, apologize. I'm not apologizing for a compliment. Then you're leaving. Colton blinked. What? You're leaving this room, right now. Or you're apologizing to her. Pick one. Colton looked around. Nobody would meet his eyes. Not the real estate developers, not the politicians, not even the showgirls. Everyone was staring at Frank. Colton's voice cracked. You can't kick me out of my own casino. I'm not kicking you out of the casino. I'm kicking you out of this room because my mother is in this room, and you don't get to be in the same room as her after what you said. This is ridiculous. Frank turned to Dolly. Ma, we're leaving. Francis, you don't have to... We're leaving. He took her arm gently and started walking toward the door. Colton panicked. Frank, wait. You're performing in 3 hours. Frank stopped. Didn't turn around. Not tonight? What? I'm not performing tonight. Not in a casino where the owner insults my mother. The room erupted in whispers. Colton's voice rose. You can't do that. You have a contract. Sue me. Frank opened the door, and Ray Colton did something nobody expected. He dropped to his knees. Frank, please. Frank turned around. Ray Colton was on the floor, on his knees, hands together. Please, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. I was drunk, I was stupid, please don't cancel the show. Frank looked at him. No expression. Say it to her. Colton turned to Dolly. Mrs. Sinatra, I'm sorry, I was wrong. You're a remarkable woman. You raised an incredible son. I had no right to say what I said. Dolly looked at Frank. Frank looked back at her. She nodded slightly. Frank turned back to Colton. Get up. Colton stood. His knees cracked. His face was pale, sweating. Frank's voice was still quiet. You're going to leave this room. You're going to go upstairs. And you're going to stay there until I'm done performing. You're not coming to the show. You're not coming backstage. You're not speaking to me or my mother again. Understand? Colton nodded. Yes. Good. Colton walked out. The door closed behind him. The room was still silent. Frank turned to the group. Show starts at 11. See you out there. He took Dolly's arm and walked to the dressing room. At 11 p.m., Frank Sinatra walked onto the stage at the Copa Room. The crowd erupted. 200 people on their feet. Nobody knew what had happened backstage. But word was spreading fast. Frank performed for 90 minutes. Every song perfect, every note flawless. He told jokes. He charmed the audience. He made them laugh. You would never have known that an hour earlier, he'd almost walked out. That's who Frank was. When he was on stage, nothing else existed. Not ego, not anger, just the music and the audience. But in the private booths, in the VIP section, people were whispering. Did you hear what happened? Colton insulted Dolly Sinatra. Frank made him get on his knees. Frank almost canceled the whole show. By the time the show ended, everyone in Vegas knew. Ray Colton stayed in his suite that night. Didn't come down, didn't show his face. The next morning, he got a call from his business partners, silent partners, the men who actually ran the Sands. What the hell did you do? I made a mistake. You insulted Frank Sinatra's mother? It was a joke. You don't joke about Frank's mother. Everyone knows that. Everyone. I was drunk. You're out. Colton's voice cracked. What? You're out. We're buying you out. You're done. You can't do that. We can, and we are. You made the casino look bad. You made Frank walk out. You went on your knees in front of 20 people. That story's already all over town. You're a liability. Within 2 weeks, Ray Colton's stake in the Sands was bought out. Not by force, not by threats, just business. He tried to buy into other casinos. Nobody would take his money. Word had spread. He disrespected Frank's mother. That was it. That was all anyone needed to hear. By 1965, Colton had left Vegas entirely. Moved back to Los Angeles, tried real estate again, never made it back. This wasn't about ego. It wasn't about power. It was about respect. Frank Sinatra had one rule that mattered more than anything. You don't disrespect family. Not as a joke, not by accident, not ever. And if you did, you answered for it. Ray Colton thought he could get away with it because he owned the casino. Because he had money. Because Frank needed the stage. He was wrong on all counts. Frank didn't need any stage. Stages needed him. And when forced to choose between performing and defending his mother, there was no choice. Dolly came first. Always. Years later, someone asked Frank about that night. Is it true you made Ray Colton beg on his knees? Frank smiled. I didn't make him do anything. He decided to do that himself. Why did you almost cancel the show? Because my mother was in the room. And nobody talks about her like that. I don't care who they are. Even if it cost you the contract? Especially if it cost me the contract. The interviewer pressed, but you ended up performing anyway. Because he apologized. To her, not to me. If he'd apologized to me, I still would have walked. But he apologized to her. That's what mattered. Did you ever speak to him again? Nope. Do you regret how you handled it? Frank's smile disappeared. Not for a second. In 1975, a journalist asked Dolly Sinatra about that night. Mrs. Sinatra, there's a famous story about Frank defending you at the Sands in 1963. Is it true? Dolly laughed. Which story? Francis defended me 100 times. The one where the casino owner insulted you. Oh, that one. Yeah, that's true. What did you think when it was happening? I thought, this man's an idiot. Were you upset? Not really. I've heard worse. I grew up in Hoboken. You develop thick skin. But Frank was upset. Dolly's face softened. Francis doesn't like when people disrespect his family. Never has. Even when he was a little boy. If someone said something about me or his father, he'd fight them. Didn't matter if they were bigger. He'd fight anyway. Do you think he overreacted? Dolly's eyes hardened. No. I think that man learned a lesson. You don't talk about people's mothers like that. You don't mock where someone came from. You don't act like poverty is something to be ashamed of. Francis taught him that. I'm proud of him for it. A Vegas owner insulted Frank Sinatra's mother in front of 200 people. He thought it was harmless, thought it was a joke, thought Frank would let it slide. He was wrong. Frank's calm response didn't just leave everyone speechless. It ended a career, not through violence, not through threats, through something more powerful, consequence. Ray Colton learned what everyone in Frank's world already knew. You could insult Frank. You could criticize his music. You could call him difficult. But you never, ever disrespected Dolly. That wasn't negotiable. That wasn't up for debate. That was law. And Frank enforced it without raising his voice, without making a scene. He just stood there and let the silence do the work. That's not anger. That's authority. When Frank Sinatra died in 1998, they found a photo in his wallet. It was Dolly, taken in 1963, the night at the Sands. She's smiling, and Frank's arm is around her. That's who Frank Sinatra was. Not the voice, not the movies, not the power. The son who never forgot where he came from, and who made damn sure nobody else forgot either.